Since I last had the discuss of being here to say this Shiur, and every time I do, I forget to thank the organizer, the sponsor, David Solomon. So at last, I've remembered the beginning of the Shiur. So sincerest and warmest thanks to our sponsor for inviting me in for, I suppose, every week for all the people he invites to say this Shiur. Greusenbach, where are you hiding? Where's he hiding? Can I see? He's not here. Oh, it's on the video. So since we got together last time, a lot has happened in Klal Yisrael. And the emphasis, when you live in one place, particularly when you live here, you don't. The more rochuk you are from something, from someone, the more you lose touch. When I moved here, I had actually recently the Biala Rebbe, an old friend, a mutual friend. He lived in Gateshead at the same time as me. And a friend of mine went to see him recently, and he said to him, after they were parting and saying Chana Shalom, the Biala Rebbe said to him, please keep in touch. It's hard to make old friends. It's very interesting. Please keep in touch. It's hard to make old friends. And about that you make new friends, but there's something special about old friends, and even if you want to keep in touch. But when a person goes and moves from one city to the other city, or a different state, or in my case, if you move continents, then Avada, it becomes very difficult to keep in touch. You start to lose touch. And we are, Baruch Hashem, since I last had discussed saying the Shiur, we've been very, very far away from terrible things that have been happening in Klal Yisrael, versteht sich in Eretz Yisrael. But nicht nur that the rockets which Baruch Hashem with Nisim V'Galim weren't able to be as matzliach as the Rishonim who were firing them wanted them to be, but something exploded into the world and affected Klal Yisrael in a way that the rockets couldn't. There was so much anti-Semitism. Now, because we live in America, maybe we read about it, maybe you weren't margish it, maybe you didn't feel it as much because we live here. But I was back in Europe, and when I was back in Europe, I took a tour. I took a tour of 35 Haredi Yidden, and we went to Scotland. Have you heard of Scotland? This is Darheim, if you're me. So I took them to a very posh tour, but I had to give them a little letter beforehand. Make sure, and we're talking Haredi, Hasidic Yidden, more apart, make sure you wear a baseball cap when you come to Europe. Right? Make sure you wear a baseball cap. And Avada, and something we are sicher not margish here, but if you live in England, and England's not as bad as the rest of Europe, France is ochen vei raboisai. But B'derech Klal, you teach people, you walk on the street, you walk on the sidewalk, facing towards the cars coming towards you. That's a double portion. That's just what you teach your children. Why? Because that way you can see if somebody's rolled down the window and he's about to spit at you, or shouts at you, or throw a bottle of urine at you, or a brick at you. And the Matzav Taka, after what happened in that in the summer in Eretz Yisrael with that war with these Hamas Chevra, and Taka, Europe there was so much anti-Semitism. It was unbelievable. It was mamish, bli shum guzma. Exactly like the 1920s and the 1930s in Europe. In Germany, they're walking in the street shouting, "Gas the Jews." And in England, Taki, you had to be very careful. Something else happened. So I went on this tour. I have to tell you, boys, there at Klal, we had no problem whatsoever. Although there were still Palestinian flags hanging all over the place, and from town halls in Europe and in Edinburgh where we were visiting. But afterwards, there was a couple, very, very sweet couple, who said, we don't want to go all the way to Europe just to visit Scotland for 6 days. We'd like to see a little bit more. And we want to go and visit Venice. Would I like to come, or would my wife and I like to come with him and his wife to Venice? Geschmack. I'd always wanted to see Venice. Versteht sich, Venice is where the first complete Shas was printed. It's also the place which was the first ghetto. The word ghetto is an Italian Venetian word. Anybody know what it means? It means a foundry. In 1516, they passed a law saying that the Jews had to live in one little area. It's called the ghetto. It was the foundry. They used to have a copper foundry there. And I suppose, Rabbi said, it was a bissel oilam hofoch, really, but it's very interesting. I wanted to spend 4 days in the ghetto. And from 1516, for 300 years, Yidden wanted nothing more than to not live in the ghetto. But I was keen to be there. It was very interesting. And it was pelletic. There were 5 shuls there. I davened Shachris in a shul called the Levantine Shul, built in 1514, and I spoke to the chief rabbi. I got an aliyah. I've never seen such an old Sefer Torah in my entire life. The cloth was almost dark brown. It's a dasach. They were, they've been boidiket, but it was unbelievable. It was an antique. And there was something about being there, something about being in that ghetto, which I found a tremendous Osiris. I found tremendously inspirational, and I couldn't quite understand what was so inspirational. And Be'emes, what was really inspirational, we're going to have to look together in Rabbeinu. Well, when I was in Gateshead Yeshiva, he was called Rabbeinu Bachaya. For some reason, he's recently changed to Rabbeinu Bachya. So I don't know exactly which one you want to pronounce it, but in my days, he was Rabbeinu Bachaya. But I found Rabbeinu Bachaya, which, interesting. If I say nothing else tonight, telling what this Rabbeinu Bachaya says, or Rabbeinu Bachya, if you prefer, says, was worth driving all the way from Lawrence up here to say this shiur tonight, just to tell you this. And I'm going to tell you this in just a few seconds. But Vada and Avada, I have to tell you, maybe you don't feel it. Maybe you've not felt it living in Muncie. But I tell you that for the Yidden living in Europe, and the Yidden living in Eretz Yisrael, since we last shmuz together, the matzav has been so bad, and the anti-Semitism is so bad, in my lifetime, I've never been margish such a shvera matzav for Klal Yisrael. Maybe you don't feel it. Well, I'm telling you it's true. And all you have to do is to get into a plane to Europe, and you'll feel it too. So it's a time for Shteitzach of Tshuva. I've already done my first Teshuva, and thank David Solomon for the sponsorship and for setting up this beautiful shiur. But as it is Erev Rosh Hashanah, or nearly Erev Rosh Hashanah, I thought it might be abyssal kedai to talk a little bit about the Yom HaDin. Particularly as the Din from last Rosh Hashanah, we didn't see it coming. Last Rosh Hashanah, did you think that people would be walking in the streets of Germany and France shouting, "Gas the Jews"? Thousands of people with big posters. Hitler was right. You can see this. Did we know that was happening last Rosh Hashanah? That was the Gezar Din? I don't think we did. So I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about Rosh Hashanah. And I have to tell you, and those of you who come to my shiur will know, I usually have a little note that I put down there. I don't usually look at them, but I always have my notes prepared. You'll notice that I don't have any notes tonight. And the reason is because there is so much that I want to say, so much that, of course, I'm not telling anybody in this Chosh of Oinam anything that you don't already know. But I want it to be, instead of a planned out shiur, I wanted to be mamish devorim hayotzim min halev. So for Shteitzach, Marabar Boisa, there are 2 days Rosh Hashanah. The first thing we have to just remind ourselves, why is this 2 days Rosh Hashanah? And there's 2 days Rosh Hashanah for Shteitzach because there's the Prat and the Klal. There's you, the Yochid, and things that you may have done wrong in your life. And then there's another day, and that's you as part of the Klal. There's a din, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, 2 possible Gezar Dins, and one for the Yochid and one for the Klal. And for Shteitzach, there is averas which you've done, which we've done, which I've done, which offended Hashem Yisborach, and then there are averas ben Adam lechaveri. In fact, I think I once asked you, of the 2 types, ben Adam lemokum or ben Adam lechaveri, which is most difficult? Which is most difficult to get forgiven? Ben Adam lemokum, ben Adam lechaveri. Who's most difficult to deal with? Let me put it that way. Hashem or human beings? I think the answer is human beings. Somebody wrote a book. I've never read the book, but I saw the title. I thought it was very funny. Learning to live with difficult people, including yourself. People are a little bit difficult. Hashem Yisborach, though, is not as difficult. and I'll try and prove that to you in a second. So people are, but let's just deal first, erstens, let's just deal with Hashem. So the halacha is the Hilchos Tshuva, and the Rambam here in Perek Aleph and Halacha Dalet. I think you all know this. Now I want to encourage you to go into Rosh Hashanah, mamish, feeling good about yourself. I don't know if you've ever had the experience. Some people have got the minhag to put inside their machzor, to make a little note, to remind themselves of the things that they mamish have to say sorry for. One year, I opened my machzor to put in my list of the things that I should be working on. And a previous year's list was already sitting in the machzor. So I picked up the previous year's list, and I held it against that year's list. And I went like this. Can you guess what I saw when I looked at both lists? The exact same thing. The exact same thing. And as soon as you see that, you go, oy, vey smear. And the Yetzer Hara laughs his head off and says to you, Yehuda Yoina, that's assuming you're called Yehuda Yoina, I am. Yehuda Yoina, Tumbar Atayver. You're really going to have the chutzpah to stand again in front of Hashem Yisborach and say sorry again for the exact same sins that you did last year again, and probably the year before that. You're a joke. You're a hypocrite. It's the first thing you have to realize, and this is very important. We have to realize, and please listen carefully. Those of you who are taking notes, write this down. Just because you failed doesn't make you a failure. Just because you failed does not make you a failure. You're only a failure if you give up. And I had the great schus to be, I think I could even say close to the Manchester Rosh Hashiva, Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Levrocha. Somebody who really was a tzaddik. Whenever I'm in Manchester, which of course the three of my children there is not infrequently, 3 or 4 times a year, I always make a pilgrimage to the kever of the Manchester Rosh Hashiva. My late wife, Alea Shalom, is also buried there. And they have, in the Oyhel, they have his Sforim. You could say Tehillim, etc. But he's got Sforim there as well. I always think it's a schus to learn his Torah next to his kever. So he wrote a parish on Shari Tshuva of Rabbeinu Yoina. And here, Rabbeinu Yoina says, if you've done terrible things, many terrible things, you've not messed about, you've taken Averas seriously, you've gone in for it wholesale, Lo sogar ba'adam daset tshuva. No matter how many things you've done wrong, the doors for tshuva are never closed to you. This is what the Heilige Rosh Hashiva wrote. And I just opened this one of my visits at random. Rabbeinu Bo l'shav l'chazik asana de'ein mokum liyush. If you saw the posters outside, it talked about the most powerful weapon of the Yetzer Hara. The most powerful weapon of the Yetzer Hara is Yush. When he says to you, Yehuda Yoina, you are a horrible, stinking hypocrite. Look at the list in your machzor, same as last year, the year before that. And you go, oh. And you're miyayish. So Rabbeinu Yoina says, no matter how many averas you've done, even if you've done the mamish wholesale, whoa, you know what? There's still teshuva for that. The afim over adam averas kol yom l'shav lifnei mesisa maklana. And we know, as the Rambam says, that if you've done your averas your whole life, you've been an artist in averas. But the day before your nifter, you do teshuva, even then Hashem's going to forgive you. Really? Said the Manchester Rosh Hashiva, the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of the Yetzer Hara is something called Yush. This Yush will tell a person like Rubenstein that there is no value to your teshuva, to saying sorry, you're a hypocrite, you don't mean it, you did the same things all over again. You've done so many averas, Rubenstein, you can't possibly do teshuva. Then a person falls into Yush, despair, and doesn't do teshuva. Said the Rosh Hashiva, Reb Aaron Kalina says, even though depression is not an avera, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, you shall not get depressed. And remember, one of our shiur not so long ago, we discussed Rashi talking about depression. Ano masha atzvas yochel ligram ein shemaveres acheres yichol ligram. But says the Rosh Hashiva, but what atzvas, what depression can achieve, no other avera can achieve. If you just get depressed, if you just feel despair, if you feel Jewish, you've lost. And Rosh Hashanah, says the Medrash Rabbah, Hashem Yisborach said to the first Baal Din, the first person standing in front of him to be judged, and Rosh Hashanah was Adam Rishon. After he acquitted him, he says, tell your children, Achakach, that Rosh Hashanah is not a Yom Adin for me to find them guilty. I set it up as a judgment, a day of judgment, to find them not guilty. He's on our side. Do you remember once I told you in the Rosh Hashiva Sunderland, there's something called Rabbi Shammai Tzan, Zechazadik Livrocha. And Rabbi Shammai Tzan, he said, he gave a beautiful moshel for this. He said, sometimes a boch in yeshiva, you will all remember this, a boch in yeshiva. When you go to yeshiva very often, you want to see progress and you want to see change happening quickly. He said, I don't know, maybe you can help me here. I've been here for 3 and a bit years now, I keep promising myself to go to Grand Central Station. I don't know why. I just want to go and see Grand Central Station. But I've got a feeling it's got a big clock. See that clock over there? I've got a feeling it's got a big clock like that. Does anybody know if my guess is correct? It has, it hasn't? It has, gewaldig. Well, there are some train stations where the clock is a bit like this one, or my watch. That means nicht nur has got hands, but if you go to Liverpool, I'm not suggesting you should, but Liverpool in England, in the train station there, which is called Lime Street, a big clock, it's huge, the size of, the whole roof here. But the sehr interessante Sache is that the minute hand, when it's going round, that's the minute hand, isn't it? And the minute hand, instead of when 60 seconds goes round doing that, it goes like this, starts counting, 60 seconds, 59, then 60 goes boom, like this, which is very dramatic, very geschmack to watch. Kids love this, wow, boom, and it does it again, right? He says very, very often, a bochel goes to yeshiva, he expects to see change like that, sudden, dramatic, poof. And when he doesn't see change, gets depressed. But he says change, said this famous Rabbi Tzan, change is never sudden and dramatic. Come out never. Usually change is gradual. It's a progression. And it's not just one Rosh Hashanah in your life. You've got many Rosh Hashanahs in your life. I'll be 100 and so on, I'll be 120 Rosh Hashanahs. It's got to be a progress where you grow and change. And as long as you know that, and as long as you know that you are not expected to be a tzaddik, in tzaddik orso yasa tov lo yechta, we do make mistakes. And Hashem is baruch set up Rosh Hashanah for you to be forgiven, then that should make you feel a little bit encouraged. So this is what the Rambam says. Are you feeling a bit more encouraged? Have I cheered you up a little bit? Good, so let me depress you. So the Rambam says, Afal pisha tshuva mechaperes alakol. Even though the tshuva works for everything, and Yom Kippur itself, a chutzum tshuva, somehow or other works. Says the Rambam, there are some averas that are makapa straight away, and some averas that it takes a little while for Hashem to do some forgiving. So the Rambam, you probably know, gives a whole list and series of averas. Suppose a person is over an asay. You should have put on tefillin, and bekavana you didn't put on tefillin, and you do teshuvah. Teshuvah, I recognize I did something wrong. I'm sorry I did something wrong. I'm determined never to do it again. And of course, if you can put it right, then the person is forgiven straight away. That asay, you did teshuvah, you're forgiven. What if the person does a lois asay? Do you remember what the Rambam says? Well, you need teshuvah, but that's not enough. I don't know if you ever had a stain, maybe tomato ketchup got you on your nice white shirt. So you put it into the washing machine, and you take it out, and there's still a little pink stain there. So what are you going to do? Put it back in. It needs another rinse, another wash. And after the wash, then it comes out. Oh, so if you did a loisa, say, you ate something which was treif, lomazogen, then you need teshuvah. And you need Yom Kippur, and then the stains wash clean. Ober, that if the loisa said that you did does not involve a chi of krisis, or Mises Beis Din. But if what you did wrong is Chiv Krisis or Mises Beis Din, then you need Teshuvah. And you need Yom Kippur. But there's a third wash that you need to get the stain out. And what's the third wash? Yisurim. This is gewaldic, right? This will so encourage you, right? Teshuvah is available to you. All you need to do is to be really sorry and wait for Yom Kippur and then get some terrible disease and have a life of pain and you're forgiven. It's so encouraging. Obvious, says the Rambam, if it includes Chil Hashem, poor. What you need is Teshuvah. And you need Yom Kippur. Then you need Yisurim. And then you need death. Oh, this is gewaldic. Oh, I'm so encouraged. No. Let's open a whole big Baal Teshuva yeshiva. Come and do Teshuvah. Look forward to a life of suffering and death. Good, huh? Are you all encouraged? So Rabbeinu Yoina, incidentally, Rabbeinu Yoina wrote Shari Tshuva as his kapora for being a misnagid of the Rambams. And Rabbeinu Yoina and other Mefoshim as well disagree with this Rambam and say that as a way to do Teshuvah and to wipe out, to remove that stain, even without Yisurim and Misa. That's even as a Chil Hashem. And what is that? Make a Kiddush Hashem. Versteht sich? I mean, it seems a bit logical, no? If a person, a Yid, did something which is a Chil Hashem, then it's meglech to get rid of the stain by a Kiddush Hashem. Zamar, you all know the Mishnah in Sanhedrin talks about there are some averas that are never forgiven. And it tells that the Maisa of Menashe Melech Yisrael. I've seen this in 3 Sorim. There's Maisa about Menashe Melech Yisrael. The whole Machlokes in the Mishnah, did he get forgiven? Or he did Tshuva. Zech, he did Tshuva at the end. But did he get to Olam Haba? Was he forgiven or did he not get forgiven in the end? So one side says yes, one side says no. So I saw in 3 Sorim an incredibly interesting Maisa. There was a Yid. The Yid was living in the old Yishuv. Going back 200 years in Eretz Yisrael. And for Shtetzach, he had to go around collecting. And where are you going to find Yidden to collect from? Poland and Russia and places like that. Now he was a very, very good collector. When I was in Koilel, we had to do collecting. I think you know, maybe you've done this yourself, that if you want to be Yotzei in the Pasha of Yisurim, then you can go around collecting for a Koilel. Right? That's a particularly difficult thing. Sof kol sof. This fellow was good at the job. I was not good at the job. The trick, of course, is when you knock at somebody's door and they open the door and welcome you with a big smile. You've got to stop being just another face at the door. And this fellow was clever. Before he came to a town, what he would do is, very interessant, he would go to the Beis Olam, Beis HaKvoros. Because you can see very often if you go to the Beis HaKvoros what sort of town you're coming to. L'moshel, if you ever visit Gateshead, if you're ever zoiche to visit Gateshead in the northeast of England, the graveyard there is shared jointly with the nearby community of Newcastle upon Tyne. If you imagine a line, call that the River Tyne. North of the River Tyne is the town of Newcastle upon Tyne, south is Gateshead. Newcastle is not a very prim place. Gateshead's a pretty prim place. As I said in Lakewood about 3 months ago when I was saying a Shiur, in fact, in Gateshead, we think Lakewood is reform. And nobody laughed. I just don't understand why. Anyway, it's a pretty prim place. So, and that's now on tape. I'm really dead now. Anyway, sof kol sof. In the exact same way as the physical division of Gateshead and Newcastle is a line and then you've got one on the other, one on top, one on the bottom. That's the same with the Beis Olam. So if you go to the Beis Olam, if you look on the Gateshead side, the headstones tell a story. And the other side also tell a story. In fact, my Rosh Yeshiva, Leib Gurovitz, he remembered me, was a Rov in the East End of London. He remembers that somebody was nifta in his shul. It's interesting, he was a Rov in London, maybe Hashem Yisborach, he might just have been, and who knows how many Reb Leib Gurovitz has never became Rosh Yeshiva of Gateshead. But as a Rov in the shul, I remember one of the people was nifta, and his savor, he asked that leading the procession to his grave on a cushion was his pack of playing cards. He loved playing cards, and this went solemnly to the grave ahead of him, right? And on his headstone, guess what was carved in the headstone? Gewaltig, right? Mein ganze Leben. Playing cards, spielen cards, nebuch. And the Gateshead side versteht sich, es hat damit getroffen, Rav this, and a Seifer, you can tell. This fellow could get a feel of where he was going by going to the basic verse. So one day he comes to town, he's never been to it before, he goes into the basic verse. This was, if I remember rightly, in Russia. And he sees there a headstone, he's looking at the headstones, he's got a feel. One of them says, Poi Nitzman, Menashe Melech Yisrael. Poi Nitzman, what? Menashe, this is Russia, Menashe Melech Yisrael. So he goes back into the carriage, and he goes into the town, and another thing, each shtetl used to have a little history book. Right, they used to have a Sefer Zikar, the whole history of the Kehillah. The Nazis get rid of most of them. So he wanted to see, what's the head story of the headstones? He's looking, and he can't find any reference. He goes and he finds some old Yidden, and he asks them the story. Do you know, buried in your graveyard is somebody, it's probably Nietman. Nobody knew. Eventually found an old Yid who did remember the story. It's very interesting. The story was that apparently before the town was a town, it was a village. Before it was a village, it was just a little hamlet, as they call it. And in the hamlet there was one Yid, just one Yid living there. There were Yidden nearby, but they were so far apart that they couldn't come together on Shabbos because of the Tchum. But on Motzi Shabbos, this fellow, who was quite, I suppose, well-to-do relatively, he used to bring all the Yidden together to his house for a Malava de Malka. So in those days, for Shtetzach, all the heating and all the cooking was done with wood-burning stoves. So he was going out to get his chevra, and his wife said, I need some more wood, we're running out of wood. She's making gefilte fish, whatever. He says, no problem. So, Be'emes, the little hamlet, we're talking Russia, the little village is surrounded by forest. And if you want wood, you just chop down a tree, and then you chop bits off. So he takes his axe, he puts it in the back, and he's going through the middle of the little village, and he's passing the church, the tifla. Outside the tifla, there's a big wooden crucifix. And on the big wooden crucifix, there's a big wooden yoshki. Stops the horses, gets down with the axe, puts it in the back, goes back, chops up the yoshki, brings in bits of wood for his wife, who's very happy, just sees broken wood, puts it in the fire, nice and dry, this is good, and off he goes and gets his chevra. So they all come together, nice malava malka, zinging a bissel, fine. Then he takes them home, the next day they go to the tifla. They turn the corner, so versteht sich, the answer is Poshet, the dirty Jew, which incidentally in this case just happened to be true. So they go get him and they're going to find a bit of yoshki. Yoshki's caught in his wood cellar, and they kill him. Now, versteht sich, when you hear a terrible tragedy, it's upsetting, but when it's a small chevra, it particularly touches you. And they couldn't understand this. I mean, everybody liked this man. He was a saint. What did he do this for? And his best friend in particular was to broch him with the fact that he'd done this crazy thing. Your mommy should committed suicide. It was so bizarre. So Sof goes Sof, when it came a few months later to setting up the headstone, the night before they were going to put up the headstone, his best friend had a dream. And in the dream, the fellow who was killed, came to him and said, don't be upset by what happened to me. I was a Gilgal of Menashe Melech Yisrael. And when I got to Olam Haba, just like it says in the Mishnah, there was a whole ganze tumult as to whether I got in or whether I didn't get in. Some people said, some of the Beis Din said, he did teshuvah. But the other people said, yeah, it's very, very good, he did teshuvah. But when he became a Baal Avera, he caused tens of thousands of Yidden also to become Avodah Zorah. And when he did teshuvah, they didn't follow him. They followed him into Avodah Zorah, but they didn't follow him back to Avodah Hashem. So the punishment, the Peshara was that I had to be Megalgal 7 times. So interesting, huh? And each time I had to come back by attacking some sort of Avodah Zorah. So don't be upset. This was my last Gilgal. Now I've got my Olam Haba. So they set up Poi Nitman Menashe Melech Yisrael. Heladik Amaisa. But you don't need to go have 7 Gilgulim. Even if it's the fact that a person has done something which even includes a Chilul Hashem, like Menashe Menachel Yisrael, making a Kiddush Hashem can make that go away as well. Do you remember once I told you the story of the father and the son I brought back together again? Do you remember the story? Yeah? Very quickly, there's a couple of people shaking their heads. I was once saying Shiur in London. I met a Yid there. He asked me about where I lived in Manchester and did I know a certain person. Turned out that the person was his son. But he was asking questions, but obviously didn't know very much about the son. And so I said, how come you don't know how many grandchildren you have? So the son had gone off the derech, and the father had lost his temper. And the father had shouted at the son, get out and never come back again. And son Taka never come back. 17 years later. So I said to the father, I think your son would like to see you again. He said, no, too much water has flowed underneath the bridge. So I said, you know what, give me your address and your phone number, I'll give you regular reports how your family are doing. And the next day I went back to Manchester, and by coincidence I bumped into his son, sort of intentional coincidence. I told the son, I was down in London, somebody who knows you well was asking after you. He said, who? I said, your father. He said, how's he getting on? I said, fine, but I think he'd be doing a lot better if he was able to see his son again. And he said the same sprach. It was sehr interessant. He said, oh no, too much water has flowed underneath the bridge. I said, look, by coincidence, I'm going down again to London tomorrow. How about if I take you to see your father? And he hesitated. So I said, that's it. I'm going to pick you up at 10 o'clock. I phoned the father, made sure he was going to be in, and I took the son down. I took the son to the front door. I mean, he wasn't a boy, he was a man. He had 3 children. I had to press the doorbell. This fellow was so nervous. I had to press it twice. And I started to worry that the father wasn't going to be there. But in actual fact, then I heard the footsteps. The door opened. And there was the father standing there looking at the son that he hadn't seen for 17 years. The father had tears streaming down his cheeks. I had tears streaming down my cheeks. And the son, of course, has tears streaming down his cheeks. The son took one step towards the father, and the father rushed out, and he held him in his hand, in his arms. They went in together. I was wonderfully redundant. I told him I'd be back in 3 hours. Picked him up after 3 hours, took him back to Manchester. Within 6 months, for a boy's side, the fellow had sold his business and his home to relocate in London so his children could see the Zaidi as they were growing up. And Taka, I was telling this to a row of a friend of mine, Rabbi Feiner, in the 5 towns, and I remembered that I said this Maisa in a shul, a very choshev shul in Manchester called, it's the Romanian shul they call it, Vine Street. And interessant, after Shavuos, it was after Shavuos, the phone rang after Havdalah, and there was a lady phoned me up and she said, Rabbi Rubenstein, you don't know what you did when you said that story. I said, what do you mean? She said, my mother-in-law, she went through the camps. Both her parents-in-law went through the camps. But this mother-in-law was as tough as nails. She thought people in Auschwitz had it easy because they had bunks. In her concentration camps, they slept on the floor. And she was as tough as nails. I don't know what the Faribel, what the Bruiges was, but there was no contact. And she told me, this lady told me, there were a whole question whether or not, because there's a son coming up to Bar Mitzvah, whether or not they should send the Bar Mitzvah to the parents, because they never replied to any of the others. But they'd sent it. It turned out that this mother-in-law, the Shriga, had torn it up and put it straight in the garbage. And when I told that story in the shul, she said, you don't know what you did, because there was a women's gallery in one of those old-fashioned shuls. She said, for the first time in 15 years, my mother-in-law looked across and looked at me. Normally she didn't look at me, looked at me. And after Yonta, she phoned me up and she said, when is the Bar Mitzvah? We tore up the invitation. We'd like to come. And what's he called? And what's he called? And Taka, after that, 2 years later, the same lady came to see me because she was looking for a shidduch for her daughter, and she wanted my help. And I said, well, forgive me asking, it's a horrible question to ask, but is there any money? Is there a nidan? Because they didn't have a lot of money. She said, oh yes, plenty of money. I said, where'd the money come from? The shviga and the sheh. I said, oh, it lasted, I said. She said, oh, I forgot, it was you that did the... Hashem Yisborach tells us it's Avinu Malkeinu. It's Avinu Malkeinu. There's nothing you can do wrong. Moreover, boys say, Yush is the greatest weapon of the Yetzer Hara. There's nothing you can do wrong that Hashem Yisborach can't forgive. Mesilas Yesharim says even murder, even adultery can be forgiven by Hashem Yisborach. Now, does that make any sense? If a person has murdered somebody, you've taken a life from the world that shouldn't be here. If somebody is mizana, there's a strong possibility you brought a life into the world that shouldn't be here. You've taken one away that should be here. You might have brought a life that shouldn't be here. What do you mean you've done teshuvah and that helps? Does that make any sense at all? Makes no sense whatsoever. There's still a dead body there, or a baby crying. So we all know what the Rambam says. The Rambam famously says, again in Hilchos Teshuvah, in Perik Beis, Ezehit Teshuvah Gemara. What's Teshuvah Gemara? Zu shebol yoda dova she'over boy ve'esha b'yoda la'asayis perish v'lo asav mipnei teshuvah. Somebody, and he gives an example, you all know this, somebody, it's an example of znus, and he's got a taiva, and he gives in to the taiva, and he does znus, and then later on the exact same circumstances present themselves, same person, same taiva, same everything, same meglachkeit. This time he doesn't do znus. But if everything is precisely and exactly the same as before, why didn't he do it this time too? And the answer is, what changed? He changed. That means the person who did the thing before may look like you, but that person doesn't exist anymore because you've done teshuvah. Says in Mesilas Yesharim, Hashem can forgive even murder, even adultery. So I say, there's nothing really to worry about, is there? I mean, suppose you're going to a court case and the judge is your father's best friend, right? Then would you be so worried? But suppose the judge is your father. Suppose the judge is your father! It's Avinu Malkeinu. Hashem Yisborach says, I'm the Tata before I'm the Melech. That's what he wants us to call him at this time of year. So what's the tzitza? But people forget, and people don't recognize that mamish, they are mishpocha of Hashem Yisborach. Bonim atem Hashem Elokeinu. And no father wants the son to be found guilty. All fathers want their sons to come back and to be the way that we should be. And I've got here's the I put it in my phone. I took a picture of this so I could have it with me wherever I want. I tried to look for it upstairs, but I couldn't find it. Pasha of Matais. Hashem Yisborach says to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's time to go out and fight against the Midianites for what they did, for causing 24,000 Yidden to be killed. It's time to take revenge. Revenge, take the vengeance of Klal Yisrael. And versteht sich, when Moshe Rabbeinu reports this to the Yidden, what does he say? Not Nichmas Hashem, Nichmas Yisrael. It's the revenge of Klal. Why? Everybody knows what Rashi says there. Rashi says, because you're fighting against Klal Yisrael, ultimately you're fighting against Hashem. So listen to what Rabbeinu Bachai says. See if I can see this in its small, tiny print here. I was so nespoiled from this, I can't tell you. Nikmas b'nei Yisrael. And Moshe Oma, it's Nikmas Hashem. Oma le Moshe l'Kadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe said to Hashem Yisborach, Rabbanu Shalom, Ilo Hayinu Orelim. If we were uncircumcised, or Oivdei Avodah Zarah, or if we worshipped Avodah Zarah like everybody else, Lo Hayasayin Asa. Lo Hayasayin Asa. They wouldn't hate us at all. Then Jews would just be like any other nations. But the Mexicans, or the Canadians, or the Venezuelans, or the French, or the Germans would be the same as everybody else. Just Jews. Why do they hate us? They hate us because we keep your mitzvahs. Because we keep your mitzvahs, that's why. He gave it to us. And the war is for you. It's an revenging you, because that's why if you fight against Klal Yisrael, it's though you're fighting against Hashem, because they only hate us in the first place. They're only attacking us in the first place because we keep Torah mitzvahs. So moreover, a boy say, since I last saw you, since we last schmoozed together, the matzav of Klal Yisrael, and I mean this honestly, I've never seen such a shver matzav. When mamish, such an explosion of anti-Semitism, particularly in Europe, which is so, it's hard to put into words. Oh, but they hate us because we keep Torah and mitzvahs. You keep Torah and mitzvahs. And suppose you're able to stand in front of Hashem Yisborach and not only say, yeah, I did things wrong, but I did things good. Because we're Klal Yisrael. And all this anti-Semitism, and all this Jew hatred all over the world, Muzayin, must be because we're keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Are we doing it perfectly? Of course not. Have we made mistakes? Yes. It might be that the same settle falls out your master from the previous year. Afal Peking. We're trying. And the raya that we're trying and the raya that we're keeping Torah and mitzvahs is because they hate us. They hate us so much. It's because we're keeping your Torah. It's something you can say to Hashem Yisborach. The Ger Rebbe used to say all the time. Yinim zayin good. Jews are good. We make mistakes. And sometimes it takes us a long time to change. But moreover, Rabbi Say, I also have never seen so much achdus in Klal Yisrael as when we saw once again the Umas Ha'olam getting together in so zufrieden to express their hatred. It brought together gewaldige achdus in Klal Yisrael. And I don't know if you remember, but once I wanted to offer you a challenge. The challenge was like this. If they say what goes up comes down, if it's the case that we want to have Hashem Yisborach forgive us, well, we all know that He's easy to get us to get Him to forgive us. He wants to forgive us. It's Avinu Shebashamayim. And He set up Rosh Hashanah in order to forgive us. Oh, but as the Rambam points out, there's one thing you can't forgive, and that's what you did to somebody else. Can't forgive you for that. You've got to get them to forgive you. So I've been saying this all over the world, and I thought I would say it to you as well. I want you to think of somebody that you used to be very close to, somebody you used to be very friendly with, and you're no longer friendly with them. It could be a friend, it could be a brother, it could be a sister. Rahman al-Islam, it could be a parent or a child. Listen carefully. You've got to get this right. What I would like you to do, because Hashem Yisborach can't forgive you if we're busy having fights with each other. And don't forget what it says, the last words in Shas is, Ina Kodesh Baruch Hu motzi kli machzik brocha elo sholem. It's interesting. The Rebbe can only find one keli to contain his brochas, and that is shalom. And the Dubna Magid gives the moshel of a barrel. A barrel. If a barrel's made well, and the boards of the barrel sit tight together, then you can pour in the whiskey or the wine or the beer or whatever it is, and it will stay there. Eina Kodesh Baruch Hu motzi kli machzik brocha. Das heißt, as the brocha from Hashem Yisborach is flowing to Klal Yisrael always. No hefsek. It's just we have to make sure that we contain it. But if the boards of the barrel are split or separate and sort of move apart, no matter how much you pour in, it's going to pour out. So this is what I want to suggest. Think of somebody who used to be a friend. Think of somebody, a brother or a sister, a parent or a son or a daughter. And phone them tonight. Phone them tonight. And this is what, you've got to say the following. You phone up and say, it's me, please don't hang up the phone. I've been thinking very hard about the fact that we haven't spoken together for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And I want you to know I've been thinking about it, and it was entirely my fault. Entirely my fault. Now, I know you don't think that it was your fault, otherwise you would have made that phone call 10 years ago. But then you say, and I'd like to come and apologize in person. Now I want to make you, I can't make you a promise, but I'm willing to make a bet. The bet is by the time you get there and you ring on that doorbell, they're going to say to you, it wasn't entirely your fault. It was not entirely your fault. And you might find you regained a friend, or you've regained a sibling, or a parent or a child, and the boards come close together. Now, I have to tell you, it's not guaranteed. A couple of years ago I said this in a shul in Yom Kippur in Manchester in England, and a week later a fellow came up to me and said, I'm furious with you. He said in his Manchester, I'm furious with you. I said, why? He said, I did exactly what you said. I phoned me brother. I said exactly what you said. And he told me to drop dead. It doesn't matter because you tried. But I said this 5 weeks ago in Los Angeles, and a fellow phoned me up 2 days later, and he said, Rabbi Rubenstein, did exactly what you said. I phoned my brother, whom I haven't spoken to for 15 years. And we were on the phone for an hour and a half. It's likely that when you phone up and say it was all my fault, and can I come and say it in person, by the time you get there, they're going to say it's not your fault. Look, it's been Adam Lamokum, been Adam Lachaver, been Adam Lamokum. I don't want to sound flippant or lack of COVID, but it's not difficult. Hashem Baruch said to Adam Rishon, tell your kinderlich, throughout all the dairas, Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Adin to find them not guilty. It's the Tata. The Tata wants the kinderlich tzurek. Abina Malkena. But he can't forgive us for what we've done to somebody else. For that you have to get the person to forgive you. So that's my suggestion. But this Rosh Hashanah, because this Rosh Hashanah we didn't think about this. We didn't see what was coming last Rosh Hashanah. I think, Dachzach, we should take this one more seriously perhaps than any other Rosh Hashanah in our life, certainly my lifetime. Because it's mamish like Europe in the 1920s and 1930s. This is a time to get it right, a time to do it right. But don't be Yash, you're good. If you do this, you prove you're good. And if they hate us, it's because we're keeping Torah and mitzvahs. But there's one thing, that's up to us. Go from here, pick up that phone, and tell your brother, or your friend, or your sister, your parent, or your child, it was all your fault.